Yeah, this was a pretty good Good Friday. I just happened to notice that there was a Fathom Events screening for Best Friends earlier this week. Best Friends, for some of you who don't know, is the reunion of Tommy Wiseau with Greg Sestero, who you now know from not just The Room, but also the biopic The Disaster Artist. This is their long-awaited reunion on the silver screen, so of course I went. I love The Room for all its irreverent, intentional and unintentional hilarity. The Disaster Artist happened to be one of my favorite movies from last year, so there was no way I was passing up this opportunity. A little setup with regards to Best Friends or Best Fiends, however you're supposed to say that title. It appears like this is Greg Sestero's turn for a vanity project. Tommy Wiseau might be headlining this movie, but he is here only in acting capacity. He has nothing to do with directing, producing it, or writing it. He is here purely to just play a part. And Greg is not just producing this movie, but he apparently wrote the movie too. He had a little bit of sense, at least, to opt out of directing and passed along directing duties to someone else who actually knows, apparently, how to direct. Because this movie is pretty well shot. It is a good-looking movie. This director has an affinity for aerial footage and probably has a fleet of drones at his disposal in order to pull that off. Knows how to set up shots, knows how to balance out exposure and lighting and so forth. Set design and locations are actual things in this movie, as opposed to The Room, where it's just, The Room and the fake exterior sets and the sense of guerrilla filmmaking they do from time to time in that movie. You can tell this is a director who knows how to direct. But man, I feel like I've already got into the pros of the movie a little bit, so let's just continue with that. Plot-wise, this is a movie that has a plot, and I actually can make heads or tails of what this plot is supposed to be, so there you go, Greg. At least you have one up on Tommy when it comes to script writing, I'm guessing, because this is a pretty straightforward type of plot. Greg plays this homeless guy named John, who befriends this eccentric mortician named Harvey, played by Tommy Wiseau. They go into business together, and it turns out Harvey's been hoarding gold scraps and teeth from all of his customers, from all the people he's had to kind of pretty up after they've died. He puts masks on the people who have disfigurements due to their death or things like that. So he's been stockpiling gold teeth for years, apparently. And John takes it upon himself to see if he can fence some of this gold, and ends up making a pretty penny at first. Feels guilty that he's leaving Harvey out of the loop, so tries to bring him into the business a little bit. They start fencing the gold together. They grow suspicious of one another. This should just be its own genre of movie at this point. Tommy Wiseau and Greg Sestero play characters that start out as friends and then become suspicious of one another as time goes by. John, Greg Sestero's character, suspects that Harvey is dipping into their nest egg, even though they swore to each other they wouldn't, because Harvey's making extravagant purchases like a new car and things like that. So he starts spying on Harvey. Harvey grows suspicious that Greg, I'm not going to call them by their names. Tommy grows suspicious of Greg, that Greg is eventually going to try to swindle him out of the money with his girlfriend, and they're both right in their suspicions. I didn't say it was, a surprising plot, just that it was a very competent, straightforward plot. It leads to a culmination and a confrontation that demonstrates to me that Greg and Tommy still haven't worked out how to properly coordinate physical fights in front of the camera, and leaves it on a cliffhanger, literally, for Volume 2. That's right. There's going to be a Volume 2 of Best Friends. They Lars von Trier that shit. So yeah, like I said, I just gave you the plot rundown. It's very standard, but at least it's coherent. At least it isn't repetitive. The scenes and characters are engaging after the 45-minute mark. The first portion of this movie is a bit of a drag. When I went into this movie, I really didn't know what to expect, whether this was going to be an attempt at serious filmmaking, or if they were going to play totally into their memeability. Like, if this is going to be an endeavor where they are 100% self-aware of the kind of absurdity that they become associated with due to The Room and due to The Disaster Artist. Going into this and seeing at first like what Greg has in store for us in terms of characters and plot, I'm like, part of me was kind of confused. Part of me was like, is he purposefully acting this way? Are they purposefully structuring these interactions this way, or are they totally in on the joke? On the way home, I thought to myself, I kind of wrestled with like, is Greg self-aware enough, or is this him trying to legitimately strike out into some kind of black comedy or drama territory? I have deduced that this is Greg's vanity project here, front and center. I think he wanted to make an honest go of some kind of black comedy drama intentionally, aside from just incorporating Tommy into the proceedings. See if they could perhaps overcome the infamy of The Room. Yeah, other than the movie being shot pretty well, this doesn't do Greg any favors in terms of acting. So far, the best Greg Sestero performance I have witnessed has come from Dave Franco. And that's not a knock against Greg, because I'm sure he's a nice guy. From what I can tell, he's a pretty good writer. But throughout all this movie, what really drags the first half of the movie down is that it is focusing a lot on John, on his character, and he's trying. I know he is, but there is nothing to this performance. There is nothing to this actual character. He plays it like Mark. It is Mark, essentially, just playing against a more likable Johnny and a more likable Lisa, because John gets a girlfriend who's a bartender, and the girl who plays his girlfriend in this, like, she actually has some charisma about her. Like, I do enjoy her delivery of lines and stuff. Her actually interacting with both Greg and Tommy. There's a point where in the movie where Greg wants to introduce Tommy to her, and Tommy is trying this flirtatious like stuff and trying to be this smooth, kooky operator, and she gives a look. Either it's a genuine look of perplexity, or she's just that good, but she gives a genuine look of and I'll give her that. But anytime it's just her and Greg talking about relationship stuff or talking about how they're gonna dupe Tommy, she is carrying those scenes. Anytime, I can't believe I'm saying that. Anytime it's Greg and Tommy is carrying him. Greg, like I said, might be a very nice guy. He's got a constant Mark Wahlberg from The Happening thing going on with his line delivery, and I don't think that's intentional. I think that's him legitimately trying, and it's that kind of walking question mark of if he's in on the joke or if this is his genuine effort that just kind of makes me kind of go for that first 45 minutes of I don't know about this. I really don't know, because it really does focus a lot on developing John. Even though I said the plot is easy to follow and is pretty coherent and is tighter than the plot of The Room, there are questionable monologues where I do kind of wonder, like, okay, come on, Greg. Like, do you want me to seriously invest in your character talking about his deceased mother? Or is this just something you wrote down because you felt indie films need that kind of pretentious monologue going in it. There's stuff that happens in the first 45 minutes like that where I genuinely am curious as to what the intent of incorporating it is. If he is just playing into the parody or satire, or if like he's like, no, this is what indie dramas contain and I'm gonna make a go of it. Around the 45-minute mark, when the actual plot of them fencing the gold scrapes and gold teeth takes more of a hold, that's when Tommy starts to really fire on all cylinders. Now, Tommy, I feel, is fully 100% aware of why he's on this project and is completely playing into his memeability. I feel because of the fact that this isn't his baby, that he was just basically brought into this because he's Tommy Wiseau, and I feel Greg is aware that he needs him in this movie to kind of cultivate some kind of notoriety or infamy. The fact that this story wasn't conceived by Tommy, the fact that this isn't produced by him, like Wiseau Films I don't think is even associated with the film. They get a shout out at the end, but I think that's about it. He is here completely just to perform, which if you've seen The Disaster Artist, if any of that is legitimately accurate, you could imagine he has a ball just acting in this movie. And boy, oh boy, does he ever. I'm going to give Tommy this. It's everything you expect from a Tommy Wiseau performance. He has the slurring a little, and I will say this movie, on and off throughout, has some audio issues. I couldn't tell if it was the actual Fathom screening that was having the audio issues, or if it is the fact that this movie, they still haven't quite figured out how to balance sound yet. Because in the very beginning, when they meet up and he's in his morgue, or in his operating theater, talking to him about what he does as a mortician, the soundtrack, which is this techno synth horror John Carpenter-ish style soundtrack, apparently done by one of the guys from Imagine Dragons, it is drowning out all of Greg's audio, all of Tommy's audio, and I'm like sitting forward in my seat, like trying to put an ear out there to figure out just what the hell he's saying. Deal with that for the first portion of the film is that not only is it kind of a drag, but also that the audio is all over the place. When it's just them talking, and again, it's weird, like around the 45-minute mark is when they actually realize, like, oh, we don't have to have the music constantly going. They drop out for some actual just dialogue. And when it is just that, and you hear Tommy performing, he is legitimately funny. Part of it is like in his delivery, but he is like his character, and I'm gonna say this, like he's actually playing a character in this movie, and this character is purposefully, intentionally funny. He is eccentric to 11. It suits this way more than, you know, him trying to portray everyman hero Johnny in the room. Like I feel there's no veneer this time around with Tommy. He is fully aware that he's brought in to play someone who is kooky and eccentric, and he owns that shit. And when they first meet, the only genuine moments of enjoyment I got out of the first 45 minutes of this movie came from Tommy. They're sitting on the ground, and he has this ritual, I guess, where he likes to memorialize his clients, the people who are dead that he's, you know, cosmetically enhanced with masks and things like that. And there's one guy named Mr. Lee. He's like, you know, in honor of Mr. Lee, let's order Chinese here. And so they're sitting on the ground in the operating theater. He's just chowing down on Chinese food. And Greg's over here, and Tommy's asking him questions about his life. He's like, where you come from? Where you come from, John? And things like that. And Greg, again, if it appears like he's really trying to reach for the dramatic root in his backstory, but it amounts to him staring off into space, being like, yeah, man, I came from all over the place, Cali, I don't really talk much about my family. My mom, I lost my mom at an early... Like, that's kind of his delivery, and I have a feeling like that's his serious face in terms of acting. Tommy, at a certain point, is like, yeah, but what do you want to do with your life? Oh, John, what you want to do? Like, he'll break out into an off-tune melody, and I just beam, because... Go for it, man. Whatever. He at least looks like he's having fun doing this. When they start to get into this gold fencing business, and they bring in this dude who... the hardest I laughed in this movie was when they first introduced this guy who's going to fence their gold, or at least establish their network of contacts that they can fence the gold through. He comes to the mortuary with two girls, and they look like they're getting ready to go to an old 80s party. Like, they're going to head to 54 or something like that after they talk to Tommy and Greg. One girl's in, like, this tight gold, shimmering gold dress. The other girl is in, like, a cocktail dress. This dude looks like he should be a snitch on Miami Vice. They're just looking around the place. They're there to inspect the gold and to assess, like, the worth of the gold. But for some reason, they just take a time out to just look around the place. The girls start poking the masks. And Tommy is, like, over here... You know, he's not so sure about the operation, and he's bitching to Greg, essentially, being like, I don't know, why we bring these strangers in here, John? Why you bring them in? Bitch, don't touch the mask! Like, it legitimately just made me laugh. The dude comes over, he's like, you don't tell my girl to do anything, and, like, gets in his face. And there's a point where it just gets quiet, and the guy's ready to say something, and then Tommy just steps over his line, and the dude's just like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude and interrupt. And I have a feeling that was an actual just blooper, and they just kept it in the movie, but it worked, because you just see Tommy back there just naturally like, haha, okay. Like, he just owns it. When he goes out and buys a car, it is a nice looking car, he's supposed to be just oozing so much enthusiasm that he's bought this car. He is owning that enthusiasm. He's like, oh, I love this car, man. You could just, it's like ice cream. You could just lick it. Like, he's doing all this Nicolas Cage vampire's kiss type shit in his own Wiseau way, and it is awesome. Whenever you just let him run wild, I am genuinely entertained. Even when he's not, like, being big, or when whatever his definition of big is. There's a point where Greg's character is shadowing him and spying on him. He suspects that he's leeching off of their nest egg for his own debts and things like that, which he is. Spoilers. But he's there with a dude who's there to collect money from his safe. And I can't remember what the guy says as the lead-in, but Tommy just turns around to me and just says, like, oh, you worry too much, man. Why is everyone so pissy about everything? Like, it's just, even like his subdued line delivery makes me laugh. And there's just this likability to this eccentric creep. Bravo, Tommy. Like, he is intentionally funny in this movie, and it pays off. It actually does. And I think it has to do with the fact that he has to, at this point, be fully aware of the effect his delivery and persona can have on a character and on the audience. So he just owns it. Greg, I feel especially after the notoriety the room gathered and after the success of his book, I feel like Greg thought this was an opportunity to be like, I'm going to show the world that I can actually do some serious, heavy acting shit. That's why he, took the creative reins this time around. He's like, I'm going to prove to people. I'm going to take the infamy and notoriety I've gained from these projects, and I'm going to turn it, I'm going to spin some gold with it. Unfortunately, he is, again, overshadowed by Tommy in this. Whether he brought him on purely because everyone knows Tommy Wiseau's name now, and they know they're in for something special when you get Tommy into the mix. Whether he thought that was going to be a legit lead-in for his talent or not, who's to say? He doesn't do anything for me in this movie, and ultimately that is the big thing, and kind of what I'm not anticipating good things for in Volume 2. Because the way Volume 1 ends, it looks like Greg's going to play more of a central point in the plot. Things are going to be revolving more around his character than Tommy, from the looks of things. I hope not, because if you're going to this movie, you're going to see Tommy above all else. You're going to go see Tommy, and you want to have a good laugh. And thankfully, it looks like he is ready and willing to give you those laughs. When it came to self-referential stuff, there are a couple of points where they do kind of homage to The Room. There's a basketball scene in this movie. It's better shot, and they have opportunity to do slow-mo at times. So I guess that's kind of an homage to any time they were playing sports in The Room. I don't know if it was in the script or if Tommy was just feeling kind of cheeky on that day, where Greg walks into a scene, and he's got a scene with Paul Scheer. He's trying to cover up who Paul Scheer actually is to Greg. And so he walks in, and Tommy just goes, "Oh, hi, John." Like, come on, man. You knew what you were doing. The audience knew what you were doing. Like, the audience was laughing and applauding at that delivery, because they're like, "Oh, there it is. There's the classic, oh, hi." He just drags it out. And it's almost like he almost looked at the camera like, "Gotcha." So I'll give him that. There's a point in a preview for Volume 2 where he is screaming at the top of his lungs, "You are driving me crazy, John." It's not quite "You're tearing me apart, Lisa," but it's getting there. Would I recommend Best Friends? Part of you has to have a fondness for the world that these guys are coming from in order to tolerate the first portion of the movie. Like, I legitimately looked at my watch in the first 2 minutes when I realized that it opened pretty abruptly too. Like, boom, no pomp or pageantry. You're just there on the streets with homeless Greg. And that first couple of minutes, I check my watch. I'm like, oh God, don't let this be the whole movie, please. And again, thankfully, there is that switch. As soon as the plot actually switches on, and it's not so much about showing off the style of, look, we can do a pretty movie too. And as soon as they try their best to jettison the Greg Sestero-led narrative, then I was all on board. So I guess, yeah, if you're familiar with The Room, if you're familiar with Tommy Wiseau, Greg Sestero, and the long history of what the fuckery that has come with their film bios, then this is one you can't pass up. Again, it'll try your patience at first, but it's well worth it once you see how much fun Tommy's having. Will I go pay for Fathom again for the second volume, which is coming in June? Probably. I'm just curious. I gotta know how this wraps up. I guarantee it'll be far more interesting than the way Nymphomaniac wrapped up in its Volume 2. Man. What a Friday.